Hey everybody. A few days ago, I've introduced you to Life, History and Mystery, an introductory course in biology. And if my memory serves me right, I had three main ideas for you. Number one, that there is very little life left, at least the kind of life that we can see with our eyes. Animals have been reduced to, by different statistics, to anywhere between 4 and 1% of the total biomass on dry land. And humans are responsible for this wholesale collapse of the terrestrial ecosystem. That's number one. Number two, to understand life, we need to view it in its historical context. And number three, that there is a lot more that we don't know about life than we actually do. And it's amazingly interesting to look at the places where our knowledge gives out. Today we'll take a step further. Let's start mining for the mind mines. So here goes. A very short timeline of life. If you want to, grab a pen, take notes. It's, much more beneficial than just sitting there listening. But a very short timeline of life. How far back do we need to take our history to be able to properly appreciate what life is all about? It's always a question in historical studies. How far back do you want to go to understand something? And sometimes it's decades, centuries. In the case of life, though, we will have to take it all the way back. All the way back to 14 billion years ago, BYA. The event that's been christened the Big Bang, when the universe is set to come into existence. Now, right away, this is a mind mine that the universe did not exist and then it existed. Where did it come from? Where is it going? What caused the universe into existence? We have no idea. It's a mystery. And we'll talk about it a bit more. For the time being, just let this fact bet itself. It is not a very obvious thing. The universe actually began to exist. Yeah, it's a it's a mind mine. 4.5 billion years ago, the sun was lit, the newly formed star, the Earth, and the rest of the planets of the solar system have been formed. There's no life. On Earth, this period between 4.5 and 4 billion years ago is called the Hadean Eon, from the word Hades. Greek for hell. Fire and brimstone. The early Earth. Half molten. A piece of rock orbiting the sun. At this point, nothing exists apart from the from the molten rock and everything that is taking place there. But there is no life. from 4 billion years ago to about 2.5 billion years ago, the so-called Archean eon, life comes into existence. It's the prokaryotic life, the simplest life possible. We have bacteria, archaea, single-celled organisms that are similar yet very distinct from bacteria. And then we have viruses. And so these things carry on merrily for about 1.5 billion years. At 2.5 billion years ago, something new appears. That something new is the eukaryotic life, the advanced life. Still single cells, but single cells that are dramatically bigger, more complex, and much more capable than the prokaryotes. The so-called Proterozoic eon, it lasts for another 1 billion years. About 550 million years ago, we begin the Phanerozoic eon. Phaneron, explicit life, Phanerozoic, the eon of explicit life, the kind of life we can see with the naked eye, the kind of life that is going extinct even as we speak. It is being added to the pre-existing forms of life, to the eukaryotic life and prokaryotic life. So, here's the qualification of what I said about the current extinction. The current extinction doesn't affect the unicellular eukaryotic life or prokaryotic life. It doesn't affect the viruses, the bacteria, the protozoans, the protophytes, the plankton. It affects the stuff that came into existence in the last 550 million years, namely the animals, the metazoans. Here we go. Prokaryotes, definition, simple unicellular organisms. And we said, bacteria, archaea, viruses, 3 things. Eukaryotes, complex unicellular organisms. And then metazoans. Metazoans are multicellular organisms made up by specialized eukaryotic cells. And that is an important distinction. An organism can be made up from multiple eukaryotic cells, yet not be an animal. Simply because there's no differentiation between the cells. A good example is, what would be a good example? Sea sponges. Sea sponges are not animals. They are colonies. And the life that developed directly prior to metazoan life was that kind of colonial form of existence. Metazoans, animals like us, are made up of eukaryotic cells, but these cells are highly specialized. So human body has in excess of 250, if my memory again serves me right, 250 major types of cells. That is something very new, and that is something that began not 0.5 billion years ago, or 550 around a million years ago, and this is the stuff that is being wiped out. So here is your very short timeline of life. Let's move on. Are you okay? If you are, let's discuss it in a bit more detail. Slightly longer, 13.8 billion years ago, roughly 14. The Big Bang event. The event itself remains unclear. We know that apparently there was a point of singularity, that is, the point where all maths gets extinguished. Nothing exists. No space, no time, no energy, no mass, nothing. And then out of that, somehow, bursts forth enough energy to form a universe. Where does it come from? Anybody's guess. Where is it going? Anybody's guess. Yet amazingly, actually it's ironic, because obviously for centuries, Christians espoused the Jewish idea. In the beginning, God created heavens and the earth. So there was nothing, only God. And then everything was created. When science came around, eventually, and certainly by the 19th century, the idea that something came from nothing was accepted to be ridiculous. And so scientists, of course, made fun of the religious people who said, haha, world is created. The scientists said, no, it wasn't. The idea is preposterous. And that went on. Oh, and the dominant idea was, the dominant paradigm was the so-called static state universe. The universe always was there, just existed. Until 1960s, when the guy by the name Hubble, working out of a small town of Flagstaff, which is really a kind of a depressing place. But hey, it has a telescope in Arizona. And so working out of there, he collected enough data. Again, I don't want to be dragged into details, but and he said, you know what, guys, I'm terribly sorry, but everything does seem to have been created out of nothing. And very kind of shyly and reluctantly, he published the Big Bang theory, which became the accepted norm. So suddenly, scientists found themselves to be on the same page as the religious people. And so for a while, or at least when the theory was first announced, the headlines read, "Science proves God." Which, of course, not the case, but nonetheless, it's ironic that since 1960s, there was this wholesale transition in how we understand the universe, from an eternal, unchangeable space-time to something that is dynamic, that erupts into being and is probably destined to end. And then what? Another Big Bang? Possibly a cyclical universe, perhaps a cascade of propagating universes, perhaps an endless multiverse. Here's your mind mine. Out there, perhaps even right here, but imperceptible to us, there could be an endless number of universes, all blossoming like balloons in the lava lamp, blossoming and then vanishing and then being recycled into new universes. Who knows? But it's fascinating to actually realize that you live within something that is dynamic. And here's another important idea, and I think I will leave you with it. By rights, this universe should not have existed. Its parameters are so finely tuned that the chances for its survival are literally nil. There's two minds when it comes to the Big Bang. One, that it should actually happen. Why would a universe be born? What gave birth to it? And what its future? That's number one. Number two, that this universe that was born actually survives. There's about a dozen fundamental constants that describe the relationship between matter and energy in the universe. Gravitational constant, the weak nuclear force, the strong nuclear force, the electromagnetic, etc., etc. And each force needs to be exactly the strength it is. If it's not, even by a submicroscopic fraction, the entire universe would collapse like a house of cards. Some of these constants need to be precise to the tune of 10 to the power of negative 64. And there's 12 of them. And so every time you add another constant, you have to multiply the odds. And by the time you've done multiplying, the chances of this thing around you actually holding together without either collapsing or being blown apart, the chances for it to form stars and planets and us and everything else, these chances are zero. Not only you live inside something that popped out of nowhere, but also you're living within a something that defies probability just by the very fact that it exists. It defies probability in a major way. And there is no explanation as to why. The so-called fine-tuning of the universe is a perpetual mystery for astrophysicists and philosophers. Get outside, look around. You are living inside and a part of a major miracle. what we take for granted shouldn't be there by all accounts. It's an astonishing mind. Not only it exists, not only it came into existence, not only it exists, but, as we'll see next time, it actually beget something totally new and strange, something we called life. And we'll begin to investigate the nature of life next time I see you. So long. See you next time. Bye-bye.